What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here. So this is going to be another episode for Classic Albums Revisited, which is a segment that I review albums that are one of my favourites of all time. Now, this is going to be a bit of a weird change of direction because I'm going to be re-reviewing an album with the original episode number than putting it in the actual order, so I do apologise that it may look really weird, but I was not really happy with the previous review of an album that I adore, that I've reviewed at the time, so I thought, why not, might as well do a re-review from a debut album that is one of my favourites of all time. And I'm going to be talking about the debut studio album by the Stone Roses. Now, this album was released in May 1989, and this will be the only Stone Roses album to be released through the Silvertone Records label. And the Stone Roses were formed in 1983 after going through a ton of lineup changes throughout the band's earlier eras, which I recommend you look at the information involving the earliest of band members before this classic lineup came to plan. This lineup obviously consists with Ian Brown on vocals, John Squire on guitar, Rennie on drums and backing vocals, and as well as Manny on bass. There was a previous album that was released, but they were previously like a post-punk style band, including an early version of I Wanna Be Adored, but they were not really happy with it, so that was eventually scrapped. And before the album's release, which would be this album, they've released a single of Elephant Stone, which is a really great neo-psychedelia and brilliant example of where the Stone Roses would later on become with their iconic signature sound. Now, the very iconic album artwork was created by John Squire, and I gotta say that as much as I love him as a guitarist, his artwork on something as very iconic as this, absolutely a really talented and awesome painter. It was inspired by the Jackson Pollock idea for the album cover, inspired by the title of Bye Badman. This album was produced by John Leckie, who previously worked with Pink Floyd, produced their classic album Medal, in my opinion the first Pink Floyd classic album, although Elephant Stone was produced by one of the members from New Order. This album is absolutely one of my favourite debut albums of all time, and as much as I love many others involving the genres with rock and metal combined, the Stone Roses' first album to me is an all-time classic, and every time I think about a top 10 debut albums list, this Stone Roses album as equally influential and as important, but just as a debut album by itself, with its production, songwriting, singles and melodies, this album is definitely in my top 10. The first song on the album, I Wanna Be Adored, is an absolute classic. This is my favourite Stone Roses song of all time and one of my top 10 songs of all time. Opens with the sound collage on these really weird soundscapey effects, and then that very iconic bass line comes in, and as the main musical rhythm guitar chords come into fruition, you hear these beautifully clean melodic guitar arpeggios, and when the full band comes in with that iconic guitar introduction, the song just became a very effectively simple but amazingly beautiful anthem. This, in its simplicity, is one of the reasons why I adore this song. This is one of my favourite tracks ever, and as I said, my favourite Stone Roses song of all time. The way Ian Brown sings to this track, such a really great tone, and John's playing on this track is absolutely one of his masterpieces. Next up we have She Bangs the Drums, and this song is another absolute corker of a song, one of my favourite songs from the band ever. Opens on another very iconic bass line, and the rhythm section, including these beautifully clean arrangements of guitar chords and smacking rhythmic drum sessions from Rennie. This is another really great song, as instantly recognizable with another brilliant hook. That's what I love so much about this album as well. It's such a hook-driven album, and She Bangs the Drums is another wonderful example of that. Just to hear the interplay between the chords to the vocal harmonies, this is just one of the other essential tracks on the record. The next track, Waterfall, this opens on some really delicately sweet guitar introductions, and this is where we hear both Ian Brown and Rennie come in together with their harmonies, and I adore this song. Waterfall, just as really great of a song. It's a pretty repetitive song throughout most of its instrumentation, but I do like the basic structure surrounding the track all over, like with I Wanna Be Adored, but Waterfall is really strong as a song by itself. And after Waterfall, we go into the track of Don't Stop, which basically is like Waterfall Part 2, but this time around, this particular transition of the song is the whole song played in reverse, which makes things really trippy and even more of a psychedelic mark of production and atmosphere. This incorporates a lot of reverse effects, and I have to say again, like Waterfall, Brown and Rennie's vocals harmonizing wise with different lyrics works out incredibly well. And I have to say that out of all of the Stone Roses tracks that I've heard, Don't Stop is very underrated, and personally one of my other favourites on the first album. Next track on the record, Bye Badman. Now, this particular track, just like Don't Stop, very underrated. Lyrically, was based on the May France riots from 1968, and if you actually look at the info on the album cover art with the lemon, that was actually a symbol during the riots, and the lemon was used as an antidote for tear gas, as that Ian Brown was talking to a guy that actually went through the riots and told him the whole story behind that origin, why that lemon symbol came to be at that time. So that's really important. But musically, Bye Badman is such a really great and highly memorable song in my opinion. Again, the tonality, the guitar chords just sounded so great on this song. Very underrated, and this is to me one of the other gems on the record, with some more of the brilliance that is John Squire's lead guitar work. So I urge you to listen to this track and absolutely give it a lot of attention, because this is a masterpiece of a song. Next track, I guess the interlude part of the album of Elizabeth My Dear, which is basically less than a minute of some beautifully folky acoustic guitar playing and Ian's lower register. I think to finalize the first half of an album like this, Elizabeth My Dear is such a brief but effective number that I really enjoy so much. Kind of reminds me on a bit of the similarity to Simon and Garfunkel's version of Scarborough Fair. Not that it's their song really, but every time I listen to this track, it puts me into that realization and that remark that it's basically similar to that. Next song is Sugar Spoon's Sister, which to me this is where the poppiness really grows even more. As much as the first half of the album does contain really anthemic and iconic sounds of instrumentation, this track kind of flows in on its natural vibe. The chords on this track were awesomely played, and I like the poppy, upbeat vibe to this track, and especially with the way that Rennie and Manny, as backing musicians, drive together. They are just talented musicians all around here, and I'll have to say that this is a particular track that reminds me on a bit of like a poppy 60s-esque vein, maybe something from like Beatles to the Byrds, as with most of this album's been inspired with the sounds of the rave music scene to the dancey music scene, as well as the poppy psychedelic goodness. And I think that this track is an excellent example with that. Another very, very strong and blaster of a song is another single on the record, Made of Stone. Now this is a song that every time I hear it, it just puts in so much adrenaline, and I do love the interplay between the basic simplicity with the simple guitar chords and just the again the joyful upbeat fruition on the chorus with the harmonies. And this incorporates another really direct and precise, memorable ability with a bit of a psychedelic style effect droned guitar solo from Squire. Made of Stone, just like I Want to Be Adored, personally needs no introduction at this point, because this is a song that will always remain as an absolute banger, and this is just always a classic. Not my favourite Stone Roses track, obviously, but I do love the other ones previously, but Made of Stone basically just needs no introduction. Shoot You Down. This is a song where musically and musicianship wise they just take things down to, I guess, a bit of like that softer balladry-ish kind of vein, but you hear the brushes from Rennie's syncopating drumming patterns, and again with the harmonies that reminds me on something like on a bit of a folky remark. Not that this song obviously is folky, but I really like the great, gorgeous, flowing nature of this track. Shoot You Down is easily the most mellow number on the record. Again, this is a song that is underrated and not as well talked about so much. That's the thing about this album, that it does contain one of the biggest songs of all time, but not many people talk about a lot of the album's non-album singles. But Shoot You Down is just a perfect blend on its beauty and the melody side. The melody to this track is great. Second to last track on the original track listing of this album is This Is The One. Now, just like with Shoot You Down and Bye Badman, this is another mellow but different volume made song. It just opens on, again, awesome guitar sections from Squire, and then the explosion, banging sounds of the drums, crashing cymbals, and the whispering vocals from Ian Brown. This is, for me, like a song that has a bit of like a commanding marching feel to it, but again, it just feels like some of the previous tracks where it brings such a joyful atmosphere with it. And this is the one, basically a structure that does get repetitive, but it's such a consistent mark on presentation and a lot of dramatic performances. And I always really like this track. Not as strong as some of the ones that I adore, dare I say that word, but this is the one really stands true to itself as another brilliant song. Now we go into the final song, the 8-minute monster of the record of I Am the Resurrection. Every time I listen to this drum beat, it always makes me wonder on the song I Can't Get No Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones, and that is an alike beat. And apparently Manny was playing the bass line to Taxman by the Beatles backwards, and then it eventually became this track by itself. And this is such an awesome closing track. I Am the Resurrection is just as loud and a big anthem of a song, especially with that great chorus that just explodes with so much spirit. And after the main part of the song, with its repetition on its structure and great sense of ability, the rest of the song musically turns into basically a jam, when you can hear Squire's incorporations on a bit of the fuzz face type of pedal, and this is where the musicianship really shines. This is a song that just goes in many different ways. It syncopates with so much tightness. Not only that the Stone Roses are one of the best bands with anthems, but as musicians, especially with commanding to each other, driving a beat with a awesome jam, I Am the Resurrection really proves that. And I think that this is just another one of the essential ones to end the album, and to me one of the strongest closing tracks to finish off a gem of an album. But let's not finish there, because there's another song that I have to talk about, which is one of my top 5 favourite Stone Roses songs of all time. That is Fool's Gold. As instantly recognisable and as just as a fun, cracking, jamming track, like with I Want to Be Adored and I Am the Resurrection, Fool's Gold has a really great, catchy, awesome beat that delivers at almost 10 minutes. You hear the funky wah-wah guitars with Squire, a lower vocal register from Ian Brown, and another wonderful bass line that really incorporates something at a precisely psychedelic but just a free-flowing jam, just like with I Am the Resurrection. But I find that Fool's Gold, just like the other ones earlier on the album, Fool's Gold defines its identity on its own. So there isn't really much I could personally go on so long about a song like this, but this is another staple for the Stone Roses, and out of all of the songs that I love immensely, Fool's Gold is always one of the top 3 most popular, and to me one of the absolute bangers in the Stone Roses repertoire. Then you go to some of the other non-album singles, well, singles that were not involved on the album, One Love and Something's Burning, which I'll talk about very briefly on here. But One Love, to me, is such a really wah-wah, trippy, psychedelic fusion goodness. One Love basically has a similar vein of a beat like Fool's Gold, and just like another track that I have to talk about now that I mention it, of What the World Is Waiting For. But One Love, another masterpiece of a song, cacophony on psychedelic wah-wah goodness. Something's Burning basically is just like a sound collage mixes with some more lower vocal performances from Ian Brown, and as well with a psychedelic flavour that is basically, to me, like an improvisational jam that has a bit of a groove to it as well. And What the World Is Waiting For, basically another protest song with the alike beat to Fool's Gold, but with the less long but more of an acoustic but powerful, I guess, balladry kind of style. And you have to say that this is another single from the Roses that not many people would really talk about. Obviously, What the World Is Waiting For was released as a B-side to Fool's Gold, but I say that this is another cracking song that needs more introductions and more replay ability. So absolutely awesome songs that, for me, should have been included on the original track listing on the album, just to really make it feel, I would say, more of a stronger and a better way to put songs like these onto the original track listing on the album. So there you have it. That is my album review for the Stone Roses self-titled debut album. It is a record that really needs to be talked about so much more, as very important as definitely maybe to What's the Story, Morning Glory, Screamadelica, Pills and Thrills and Bellyaches, the Manchester scene, whatever. This is always one of the best debut albums of all time. Production done by John Leckie, as I've said. His work with the Roses was just fantastic. I adore the sound of the band on here, and I will be reviewing the album Second Coming for Motley, aka B. Peck, who's a massive fanatic of the Stone Roses. He suggested me to review the album, but look no further if you want to get into some of the greatest 80s albums of all time. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.